Dust Hollow, New Mexico Territory, 1884. Rosa Mendez stood beneath the yellow light of Ezra Pike's saloon, with a pistol aimed at her ribs, and the deed to her late husband's copper mine spread across the table. If she signed, she would lose the mine, the water beneath it, and the last home her family had left. If she refused, Owen Vale had promised she would not leave alive. No one moved. The miners stared at their cards. Ezra's hand hovered beneath the bar, inches from an old shotgun he knew he could not raise in time. Outside, wind dragged sand along the boardwalk like dry bones. Owen pushed the pen toward her. "Your husband is dead, Rosa. That ground belongs to men who know what to do with it." Rosa looked at the paper, then at the pearl-handled revolver in his hand. Her fingers trembled. Her voice did not. "No." In the darkest corner of the saloon, a scarred stranger lifted his eyes from an untouched glass of whiskey. Clay Rowan had spent 18 years avoiding rooms like this one. Rooms where fear sat heavier than smoke. He had come to Dust Hollow for one man, not for Rosa, not for the mine, and not to save anyone. Owen seized Rosa's wrist and forced the pen between her fingers. She drove the steel point through the signature line and tore the page in half. The revolver fired. Rosa folded against the table, one hand pressed to her side as blood darkened her dress. Chairs scraped. Someone gasped. No one stepped forward. Clay did not reach for his gun. He crossed the room, walked past Owen, and lifted the iron bar beside the front door. The lock dropped into place with a heavy clang. Only then did Owen notice the scar running from Clay's cheek to his jaw. The color left his face. "You," he whispered. Clay turned. Before he could answer, Rosa gripped the table and forced herself upright. "Don't kill him," she said through clenched teeth. "Not until he tells us where they moved the water." Every eye shifted toward her, and for the first time that night, Clay understood that the wounded woman might be the only person in Dust Hollow who knew how to bring down the Vale Empire. Behind him, a gun hammer clicked. 2 days earlier. Clay Rowan rode into Dust Hollow beneath a white New Mexico sun that had burned every color out of the land. His horse stumbled on the main road, catching itself before its knees struck the dust. Clay dismounted, and led the animal toward the trough outside Ezra Pike's saloon. The basin held less than 2 inches of water. A woman was already there. Rosa Mendez stood with one boot braced against the trough, lifting a cedar bucket with both hands. The rope had rubbed her palms raw, but she pulled steadily, refusing help from 2 miners watching from the shade. Across the road, a Vale mining wagon rolled past with 3 full barrels, sloshing under canvas. Rosa watched it go. She did not curse. She only tightened her grip on the rope. Clay noticed that. He also noticed the green dust on the wagon wheels, the copper stain along the axles, and the black V burned into the sideboard. 18 years had passed since he had seen that mark carved into a survey stake beside a dry well. His hand went still on the reins. Rosa looked at him then. Her eyes moved from the scar on his face to the revolver at his hip. "Water's for paying customers," she said. Clay laid an old silver piece on the rail. "That enough? It is if your horse drinks first." The answer caught him off guard. Most people in Dust Hollow measured kindness by what it might cost them. Rosa measured it by who was thirstiest. Before Clay could reply, hoofbeats sounded at the far end of the street. Owen Vale came riding between the buildings in a cream-colored coat, too clean for the town around him. 2 armed men followed. He stopped beside Rosa and looked at the bucket in her hands. "My father's offer expires Thursday," he said. "After that, the mine won't be yours to sell." Rosa set the bucket down carefully. "My husband left me that ground." Owen smiled. "Dead men leave many things. Keeping them is the difficult part. Clay lowered his hat brim, but not before Owen glanced toward him. For one brief second, the young man's smile disappeared. Then Rosa turned toward the northern ridge. A thin column of dust was rising above her mine. Not wind, falling timber. Rosa reached the mine before the dust had settled. One of the outer braces had split and dropped half the entrance into the shaft. Fresh saw marks shone pale against the dark timber. This was no accident. She tied back her skirt, lit a lantern, and stepped over the fallen boards. Clay caught the door frame before it closed behind her. "You go down there alone. The ridge may keep you." Rosa turned, breathing hard from the climb. "Then stay out here and tell Owen Vale where to find the body." She disappeared into the darkness. Clay followed. The tunnel narrowed quickly. Copper stained the rock green and blue beneath the lantern light. Water tapped somewhere deeper in the hill, slow and steady, like a clock no one above ground could hear. Rosa knew every brace her husband had set. She touched each one as she passed, counting under her breath. At the third bend, the roof groaned. Clay seized a loose post, while Rosa jammed a wedge beneath it. Stone dust poured over their shoulders. For several seconds, neither spoke. They worked with the sharp, silent rhythm of people who understood that fear wasted air. When the beam finally held, Rosa noticed Clay's hand shaking, not from strain. The walls had drawn too close around him. She gave him the lantern without asking why, and moved ahead where the passage widened. Clay followed after a long breath. At the lower drift, Rosa stopped. A trench had been cut through the floor. Water that once gathered in her mine now ran through a narrow channel toward Vale Land. Clay knelt beside it. The mud held fresh boot prints and fibers from blasting cord. "They've been diverting it for months," Rosa said. Clay scraped dirt from a timber stake buried near the channel. A black V had been burned into the wood. His face hardened. He had seen that mark before, on survey posts moved in the night, before men vanished and land changed hands. Rosa studied him. "You know what this means." Clay looked toward the dark water disappearing beneath the ridge. "Vale doesn't want your copper." A distant crack rolled through the tunnel. Dust sifted from the ceiling. "I wants every well in Dust Hollow." By nightfall, Dust Hollow knew someone had tried to bury Rosa Mendez inside her own mine. No one said so aloud. Men passed Ezra Pike's saloon, with their heads lowered. Vale mining still paid half the town, and hunger had taught them silence. Rosa sat near the kitchen, while Clay washed blood from a cut across his palm. She took the cloth from him when he wrapped it badly. "I can manage," he said. "So could I," Rosa replied. "That nearly put us under a mountain." She tightened the bandage. Clay did not complain. For a moment, the saloon held only the rasp of cloth over scarred skin. Rosa saw old burns along his fingers and a white seam across his thumb. These were not the hands of a man who had spent 18 years avoiding trouble. The front door opened. Sheriff Amos Bell entered with 2 Vale men behind him. He smelled of tobacco and the whiskey he used to steady his courage. He nailed a paper to the wall. "Territorial dispute," he announced. "The Mendez claim is sealed until the judge reviews the boundary." Rosa stood. "The judge is Gideon Vale's cousin." Amos avoided her eyes. "Then you should have accepted the offer while it was generous." The notice accused Rosa's dead husband of tunneling beneath Vale Land. By sunrise, no miner could work her claim, haul ore, or repair the entrance without risking arrest. Owen did not merely mean to take the mine. He meant to stain a dead man's name until Rosa had nothing left worth defending. After Amos left, Clay asked where she kept the original survey. Rosa's expression closed. "You arrived yesterday. Now you know about my water, my mine, and papers no stranger should care about. I care about Vale. That is not the same as caring what happens here." Clay reached into his coat, then stopped. "There are things I need to tell you." A folded scrap slipped from his pocket. Rosa picked it up. It showed the northern ridge, the lower water drift, and a survey line drawn 18 years earlier. At the bottom, beneath a faded military notation, was one name: Clay Rowan. Rosa held the survey scrap beneath the lamp until the faded lines stopped trembling in her hand. "You were here before," she said. Clay closed the storeroom door. 18 years ago. That is not an answer. He looked at the name written beneath the military notation, then at the revolver hanging from his belt. "In 1866, Gideon Vale and I rode with a border survey detail. We found copper in the northern ridge and water beneath it. Enough water to build a town around." Rosa's face hardened, and he took it. He tried. Clay told her about the dry well, the shot in his back, and the 3 days he had spent beneath the desert sun, too weak to climb and too stubborn to die. He did not soften the rest. He had followed the men who helped Gideon move survey stakes and silence witnesses. Some had gone to prison. Some had vanished before any judge could question them. Rosa folded the map. "You came here to kill him." Clay did not deny it. "My husband died in that mine," she said. "His name is written on a seizure notice, as if he were a thief. If Gideon dies in the street, the truth dies with him. The law belongs to Vale. Then we take it somewhere he does not own." Clay stepped closer. "You think a stamped paper will stop him?" "No. I think witnesses might. Records might. Men who are tired of watching their children carry empty buckets might." For the first time, anger broke through her control. "I do not need another man deciding what justice should cost me." The words struck harder than any bullet. Clay lowered his eyes. Rosa handed back the map. "Leave before sunrise." A floorboard creaked beyond the storeroom. Owen Vale entered the saloon with 2 armed men. He carried a leather folder and a fountain pen. He placed the transfer papers on Rosa's table. "Sign tonight," he said, "or tomorrow they will dig you out of that mine with the rest of your husband's lies." Clay moved toward the rear door. Rosa watched him go. But when Owen's men spread apart to block every exit, Clay stopped in the darkest corner of the room. Owen pushed the pen across the table. The miners at the bar lowered their eyes. Ezra Pike stood rigid behind the counter, one hand near the shotgun beneath it. "Rosa, read the transfer one final time." The paper gave Vale Mining her copper claim, every tunnel beneath it, and all water reached through those workings. At the bottom, 3 blank lines waited for witnesses. Owen smiled. "Make it voluntary." Rosa took the pen. For one breath, Clay believed she might sign. Instead, she drove the steel nib through the signature line and tore the sheet down the middle. Owen's face emptied. The pistol cleared his holster before anyone could speak. The shot struck Rosa in the side and threw her against the table. Ezra shouted her name. Chairs scraped backward, but no one crossed the room. Clay did not draw. He walked to the front door, lifted the iron bar, and dropped it into its brackets. The clang silenced even Owen. One of the guards recognized the scar first. "Rowan!" Clay turned. "Step away from her." Both men reached for their guns. The first bullet tore through Clay's coat and burned across his shoulder. He fired from behind an overturned table. One guard fell before clearing leather. The second shot wide, shattered a lamp, and rushed Clay through the smoke. They struck the floor together. Clay trapped the man's wrist beneath his knee and drove the revolver away. The gun fired into the boards. He hit the guard once with the Colt's grip and left him breathing, but senseless. Owen reached for a small pistol hidden beneath his coat. Rosa saw it. Clay. I turned in time. Clay kicked the weapon away, caught Owen by the collar, and drove him against the table. Owen twisted, his knee trapped beneath his own weight. Bone cracked. His scream filled the saloon. Clay raised his revolver. From the floor, Rosa pressed both hands to her wound. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't become Gideon for me." Clay stared at Owen, then lowered the barrel. "My name is Clay Rowan," he said. "Tell your father the man he buried came back." Outside, hoofbeats thundered away toward the Vale house. Inside, Rosa caught Clay's sleeve. "The original survey," she breathed. "Ezra must keep it." Then she went limp. Rosa woke to the smell of blood, lamp oil, and wet cloth. She lay on a narrow cot behind Ezra Pike's saloon, while the town doctor worked a curved needle through the wound in her side. The bullet had passed through cleanly, but every breath felt sharpened. Beyond the wall, boots gathered in the street. Clay stood at the window with his wounded shoulder wrapped beneath his coat. Ezra loaded shells into the old shotgun with hands that would not stop shaking. Gideon Vale arrived in a black carriage beside Sheriff Amos Bell. 8 riflemen spread across the road behind them. 2 wagons followed, each carrying blasting powder. Gideon did not ask about his son. "Send Rowan out," he called. "Then hand over the Mendez survey, and the mine will be closed without further bloodshed." Rosa forced herself upright. He didn't bring that powder for the saloon. Clay looked at her. "The lower chamber," she said. "If he brings down the main supports, the water channel disappears under the ridge. No tunnel, no evidence, no claim." Outside, Gideon gave them until noon. Clay checked his revolver. "I walk out. He may leave the mine standing." "No," Rosa said. "He'll kill you, bury the water, and call both things lawful." Clay's jaw tightened. He had spent 18 years imagining Gideon alone in front of his gun. Now the man was waiting in the street, and Rosa was asking him not to take the shot. She pulled the old survey from beneath her dress and handed it to Ezra. "Get the miners who hauled from our shaft. Get every family that drew water from the lower seep. Names matter now." Then she pointed to a service passage marked along the eastern wall. "I can reach the control chamber from the wash behind the ridge." "You can barely stand," Clay said. "I know the mine. You know how to keep men looking the wrong way." Their eyes held. It was not trust restored, not yet. It was something harder. 2 wounded people placing their lives inside the other's decision. A rifle cracked outside. The front window burst inward. Then Clay saw one of Gideon's men set a powder keg beside the mine's main support. The first volley tore through the front of the saloon. Clay fired twice from behind the bar, not to kill, but to drive Gideon's men away from the powder wagon. Ezra dragged 2 miners into the cellar, while smoke rolled beneath the ceiling. A bullet struck the hanging lamp. Flame spilled across the floorboards. Clay kicked a rug over the fire, but another shot splintered the post beside his head. His right hand had begun to numb from the old wound in his shoulder. Each recoil felt slower than the last. I was not winning. I was buying Rosa minutes. Behind the ridge, Rosa entered the service passage alone. She held a lantern in one hand and pressed the other against her bandaged side. Blood warmed her fingers again before she reached the first ladder. The tunnel breathed cold air against her face. At the lower chamber, she found blasting cord running beneath 3 support beams. The fuse had already been lit. A red spark moved through the darkness with certainty. Rosa dropped to her knees and pulled at the first charge. The knot would not loosen. There was not enough time to remove them all. Across the chamber stood the iron wheel her husband had installed. Opening it would release the trapped water above the drift. The flood would drown the fuse and carry the pressure away from Dust Hollow. It would also collapse the richest copper chamber in the Mendez claim. Rosa stared at the green-veined wall. That ore had paid for medicine when her husband was injured. It had kept food on their table. It was the last proof that his years underground had built something no veil could erase. Above her, the mine trembled. She imagined the town troughs empty. Children walking miles with buckets. Ezra's saloon abandoned. Every small claim sold to Gideon because no one else controlled water. Rosa wrapped both hands around the wheel. The metal refused to move. She braced one boot against the stone and pulled until the stitches in her side tore. The wheel groaned a quarter turn. A revolver hammer clicked behind her. Gideon Vale stood at the mouth of the chamber, dust on his black coat, and a pistol leveled at her heart. "Your husband stood there too," he said. "He made the same mistake." The fuse burned closer. Gideon kept the pistol steady, while the fuse hissed across the stone. "Your husband found the diversion," he said. "He threatened to take it before a territorial judge." Rosa's hands remained on the iron wheel. "So you killed him." I weakened 3 braces. The mountain did the rest. The words landed without mercy. For years, Rosa had imagined an accident, then sabotage, then a truth she might never prove. Now the man responsible stood close enough for her to see copper dust caught in his beard. A shot cracked from the passage. Gideon turned and fired. Clay staggered into the chamber, one hand clamped over his lower ribs. His return shot struck the wall. The old damage in his shoulder had taken the strength from his grip. Gideon smiled. 18 years, Rowan, and you still came too late. Clay sank against a timber, his revolver hanging low. Gideon stepped toward him, hungry for the ending he had once been denied. Rosa pulled the wheel. Pain tore through her side. The valve groaned another half-turn, then broke free. Water exploded through the gate. It struck Rosa at the knees, swept Gideon from his feet, and drowned the burning fuse beneath black mud. The chamber filled with the roar of released pressure. Supports cracked. Green-veined rock split from the walls. Clay reached for Rosa as the floor shifted. A beam fell across Gideon's legs, pinning him beneath it. His pistol vanished in the flood. Clay found the weapon first. He stood over Gideon with both hands around the grip. The barrel shook, but at that distance he could not miss. Gideon stared up at him. "Do it!" Rosa braced herself against the valve housing. If he dies here, he takes the truth with him. Clay saw the dry well again. The blood. The years he had given to one bullet. Then he lowered the gun. Together, Rosa and Clay climbed toward daylight as the richest copper chamber collapsed behind them. By the time they reached the surface, water had broken through an old drainage cut and was running toward Dust Hollow. Territorial deputy marshals were riding into town. No one cheered. Clay looked at the muddy stream, then at Rosa's blood-soaked bandage. They had saved the water. The mine was gone. 3 weeks later, water ran through the public trough in Dust Hollow again. It was clouded with silt, and every bucket carried the metallic smell of the ridge. No one complained. Children filled tin cups. Horses lowered their heads. Small claims that had been ready to close reopened one careful day at a time. The Mendez mine remained sealed behind fallen stone. Rosa stood outside Ezra Pike's burned saloon, with one hand over the healing wound in her side. The copper chamber that might have secured her future was buried forever. What remained was the land, the ruined entrance, and the water beneath it. She had begun keeping a ledger at the trough. Every household received a share. Every barrel was marked. No company or sheriff would quietly own the flow again. Gideon Vale had been carried from the mine alive. The survey, diverted channel, and Rosa's testimony had gone with the deputy marshals to the territorial court. Owen faced the saloon witnesses. Amos Bell no longer wore a badge. Justice had arrived, but it had not restored what was lost. Ezra's roof was blackened. Rosa's mine was gone. Clay still moved carefully where Gideon's bullet had entered below his ribs. That morning, Clay saddled his horse. Rosa watched from the saloon steps as he tightened the last strap. "The road west is clear," he said. "So I heard." I waited for her to ask him to stay. She did not. Clay looked toward the northern ridge. "The debt is finished." Rosa lifted a new iron hinge from a wooden crate and set it beside him. "You locked that door when every man in Dust Hollow had learned to look away." Clay glanced at the charred frame. Rosa pushed the hinge closer. "Stay long enough to hang another." There was no promise in her voice. Only work that needed doing, and room beside it for a man willing to remain. Clay looked once toward the open road. Then he removed his saddlebags and placed them on the porch. Ezra left a hammer on the step without speaking. Clay picked it up. Rosa returned to the trough to record the morning allotments. Behind her, the first measured streak of iron against wood crossed the street. Then another. Between the blows, water moved through Dust Hollow, carrying silt, memory, and the cost of everything they had chosen to save. Thank you for staying with Rosa and Clay to the end. In Dust Hollow, they learned that saving a home can demand more than courage. it can demand the loss of the very thing you fought to protect. If this story of sacrifice, justice, and a hard-earned second chance moved you, please subscribe and turn on notifications for more cinematic Western romance and frontier survival stories. And tell us in the comments, would you have sacrificed the mine to save the town's water? Disclaimer: this is a fictional Western romance story inspired by life on the 19th century American frontier. Characters, events, dialogue, and dramatic situations are created for storytelling purposes. Historical settings and cultural details are researched for authenticity. But this video is not a documentary or a factual historical record.